When it comes to three-row luxury crossovers, one nameplate stands them out amongst the competition. Debuted as a 2001 model year, this multi-dimensional luxury crossover has enjoyed 19 years of production over 3 generations. Our spotlight is on this 2020 Acura MDX A-Spec. A middle-of-the-range sporty trim, Acura hopes to win customers over with its $54,390 price point. Now, this is the first modern Acura that we're featuring in a spotlight episode. Last year, we had the chance to do the 2018 TLX as a showdown. So we're going to be going over absolutely everything you need to know if you're in the market for this vehicle and everything else you need to know about a modern Acura. The first weekend of October and it's already getting a little chilly here. Soon enough we're going to have snow, so it's a nice sort of mid-period here where it's not too cold, not too warm, but I'm just dreading that snow. So today we're not really testing the super handling all-wheel drive system on this Acura, but at the end of the day we will be using it pretty soon. We're hoping to get some of the other models from Acura over the next little while, so we're going to be testing them fully. But again, this is the first full spotlight that we're doing on a modern Acura. The 2018 TLX that we did last year was again middle of the range spec. We were doing it as a showdown, so today we've got this for a full week and we know a little bit more about it. Now, I mentioned $54,000 and change. That's the base price for the super handling all-wheel drive Acura MDX sold here in Canada. This A-Spec, $60,990 Canadian. We'll talk in a few minutes about how this compares with the direct competition price-wise with something like the Infiniti QX60. We actually featured that last year as well. You could also say that this competes with something like the Buick Enclave. Those are 2 premium vehicles in the midsize 3-row crossover segment. I don't think this competes with Lexus, BMW, or Mercedes. You could say this competes with an Audi Q7 though, and we're not going to be really talking about that because we haven't featured it. We'll talk all about all that in a couple minutes. The MDX comes with a 3.5-liter direct injection single overhead cam iVTEC V6 engine, produces 290 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque. You'll find out again in a couple minutes how that compares to some of the other competition. It's a 9-speed automatic sequential sport shift transmission, thankfully not a CVT. Good on you, Honda, for putting something else in this instead of the CVTs that we usually find in their products. And it also comes with super handling all-wheel drive. Some of the safety tech that comes with this includes AcuraWatch, which has blind spot monitoring, collision mitigation braking, cross traffic alert, forward collision warning, lane departure warning, road departure assist, and automatic high beams. The A-Spec trim comes with 20-inch A-Spec design dark alloy rims, auto-dimming power folding mirrors, headlamp washer delete with this trim, heated windshield, and the JewelEye LED headlights with LED taillights and LED fog lights. This also comes with a power moonroof, but not a panoramic one, active cruise control part of that safety system, and front and rear parking sensors. And as I said, the A-Spec is right in the middle. You can go up 2 other trims with the MDX. You can get things like a 360-degree camera, but for the most part, this is what a middle-of-the-range trim would look like, and it is supposed to be the sportier option here. You do get quite a bit of tech, but again, if we think back to even the Volvo XC90 that we featured, the Momentum, yeah, tech's pretty similar on that, but when you look at something like the X5 from BMW that we drove, there really is no comparison. I mentioned it to one of my friends that this doesn't really compete at all with a 2019 BMW X5, maybe a 2009 BMW X5. Now, I could spend an entire episode talking about what a premium vehicle such as this Acura is compared to a consumer vehicle like a Honda or a luxury vehicle like a Mercedes-Benz. I'm not going to spend that much time with it, but those are the 3 core segments as far as I'm concerned. Consumer is all the consumer brands. Premium really is just the 3 Acura, Infiniti, and Buick. You can consider Audi part of that. Some people do consider Audi to not be a proper luxury brand either. And then you've got the luxury stuff like Jaguar, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. We're not going to go into that. I just want to mention some of the direct competition for this vehicle. As I mentioned, this has a 3.5-liter V6 engine, 290 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque with a 9-speed automatic transmission. Base MSRP, as we said at the beginning, is $54,390 Canadian. And then if you go up to the absolute top trim when it comes to the MDX, you're looking at $65,490 Canadian. If you look at the absolute direct competitor to this, people will be cross-shopping them if they're looking for a premium 3-row crossover, the 2020 Infiniti QX60, They have a number of different trims with that. The base trim starts at $48,995 Canadian, and it will only go up to $61,695. It has a 3.5-liter V6 engine, 295 horsepower, 270 pound-feet of torque, but it uses a CVT. Now, we did talk about that quite in depth. We not only did a showdown comparing it with the Buick Enclave and the Mazda CX-9, but we also did a spotlight on that, so you can watch that video if you're curious to know more about the Infiniti. Lexus also could be a competitor in the sense that it's also a Japanese brand. The 2020 Lexus RX 350L base MSRP is $59,060 Canadian, and it goes up to $72,400. So quite expensive when it comes to Lexus. And that mostly is because it is a proper luxury brand. It competes with the likes of BMW and Mercedes. It uses a 3.5-liter V6 engine, 290 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque, so the same numbers as the MDX, but it uses an 8-speed automatic transmission. So you'd have to go into the features and figure out kind of which you want. Again, this is well equipped for what you get out of it, but not fully loaded. If you go up to the top trim for the MDX, you could certainly get more features out of it. But if you want pretty much full luxury, you're going to have to go with something like a BMW or a Mercedes. And that's something I've been talking about when it comes to Acura for quite some time. You can complain all you want that I'm comparing this to other things and I'm saying it's not really luxury, but it really isn't. I mean, if you're really looking for a luxury experience, you're going to want to have maybe a leather dashboard, Napa leather seating, panoramic sunroof, features that you don't really think that you need, like heated armrests or a climate control system with a perfume enhancement. That stuff just doesn't exist on the Acura. The only real feature that makes this stand apart from any other vehicle we've tested is automatic heated or ventilated seats. So if you turn the HVAC temperature settings higher or lower, then it will trip it to go into automatic mode for the seats. So it'll either cool the seats or heat them depending on the temperature. You can turn that off. If you have it in full automatic mode, you have to put it up to like 28 degrees, even for the first level heat to come on. And you have to put it really low, like 16 degrees for the first level of the ventilated seats to turn on. So for most people, they'll use the heated or ventilated portion of the seats manually, just like pretty much every other car on the planet. Aside from that, there isn't anything about this Acura that really stands out from the rest. And that has been what I've said about Acura for years now. And not that I really have to justify my point, but growing up, all we had were Acura or Honda vehicles. We featured two of them, my 1990 Honda Accord and my 1992 Acura Vigor. So I have quite a bit of experience when it comes to the Honda Motor Company. And back in the 90s, Acura made sense. They were the sporty alternative. They made really exciting vehicles that pushed the industry forward. But today, Acura is not really the sporty brand. It's not trying to compete with BMW. The A-Spec here is pretty tame by comparison to something like even an M performance car from BMW or even a baby AMG from Mercedes. And then it's also not the full-out luxury car either. It doesn't have all the features or all the excessive luxury that you would want out of a true luxury vehicle. So Acura feels a little lost. And I'm going to continue saying that until they finally find their groove, figure out what they want to do with their brand. Because right now, it's just a nicer version of the Honda Pilot. Now let's talk about some of the interior features. It does have acoustic glass with active noise cancellation. Again, nice features to have, but not necessarily on the same level as a BMW or a Volvo. It's still relatively noisy there when you're on the inside, similar to what we saw with the other Honda products we've driven recently. You do have navigation with Sirius XM, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. This comes with a 10-speaker ELS Studio premium system. If you go up one trim, you'll get one more speaker. You go up to the top trim, you'll get two more speakers. You have tri-zone automatic climate control with automatic heat and ventilation, as I said, for the seats. Sun position detection system, that's kind of cool. You'd find that normally on a Mercedes S-Class. A heated steering wheel and the leather and Alcantara seats with the A-Spec gauges. Because this is the sport trim, you have a little bit more of a sporty interior design to it, but again, pretty tame. The dual screen setup might not be for everybody. I find it works in this situation. You have your music or climate controls on the bottom with your navigation or car settings on the top. If you use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you plug your phone in. You have an easy way to get into that system. You just have to use the rotary knob in order to navigate through the menu systems. Aside from that though, the car is comfortable. It gets the job done. It's what you would want out of a car, but much like what we talked about a couple weeks ago with the 2019 Honda CR-V, it just feels average. It's not trying to exceed anybody's expectations here. It just kind of fits in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some reason that people like buying these Acuras that I'm not aware of. But so far, it just feels like a regular mid-size three-row crossover. But that's about it for the features and tech on this vehicle. Let's take it on the road now, talk about how it performs, handles, and drives, and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for a $60,000 midsize luxury crossover with 3 rows and don't necessarily want to buy something from Germany. This is not the most technologically advanced midsize luxury crossover that we've driven. In fact, both of the direct competitors, like the Infiniti QX60, they're pretty old in this marketplace. I mean, the Infiniti is much older than this, but even this generation MDX is not new. And when you take a look at the interior, you can see that it is a little dated, right? Dual screen setup, actually, I do like it. It's just the technology behind it is a little dated. The instrument cluster, while most of it is analog, the digital portion of it, I don't really find a use for it. I actually keep it on the dynamic mode display, shows you the current status of the super handling all-wheel drive, so you can get a better idea of how it works. And for the most part, it's always sending power to the front wheels. It says it sends power to the rear wheels at the same time, even at highway speed. I think that the first bar is just to tell you that they are engaged, not necessarily driving. But when you take a corner, it'll send more power to one side, so you have better control through the corners. It's one of the reasons why the super handling all-wheel drive system is actually really good in the marketplace, and why this could be a very good winter driver. Obviously right now, it's the beginning of October. We don't have that bad weather. We haven't even really had too much rain, just a little bit of light stuff, so I haven't had to test the super handling all-wheel drive at all. But I'm sure we'll have some opportunities this winter. We're hoping to book a number of other vehicles. But again, you think back to the QX60 that we featured, pretty dated on the inside. Things have not changed when it comes to that. The Buick Enclave is new for last year. We really did like that. We named that one of our top vehicles in 2018, and that is a good choice if you want something that isn't a balls-to-the-wall luxury experience, but still kind of tops out around the $65,000 Canadian price point. So how does the Acura fit into the marketplace? And what type of people are looking at this car? Well, much like a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Honda CR-V, the people who are looking at this are probably pretty similar. They just have a bigger budget. They want a safe bet. And again, that's saying a safe bet from a reliability standpoint, and no fuss, just straightforward, gets the job done. That's what the Acura MDX does. It's not going over the top. It's not putting a ton of innovation in there, which ultimately down the road will break down. It is a simple enough vehicle. And yeah, it essentially uses the same engine that's found in the Honda Pilot. That was one of the things about the 90s Acura world, which one of the reasons why I really liked Acura back then was because there was a major reason to upgrade from something like the Accord to the Vigor. The engines were different, the transmissions were different, the space on the inside, the design was different. And while the design of this is quite different from the Pilot, it still uses essentially the same J35Y engine. This is a J35Y5. The Honda Pilot uses a J35Y6. There's a 10 horsepower difference with this being a little bit greater. But the engines are about the same. Yes, you get a 9-speed transmission. Thank you, Honda, for not putting a CVT on here. The 9-speed is very nice. You do have flappy paddles. I honestly have never used them. In fact, we're in comfort mode right now. You don't really need to keep it in sport mode, and you really don't need the paddle shifters. We can put it into sport mode for the dynamic, as well as change the transmission into sport mode. 2 different profiles for that. And yeah, let's try a manual mode just so you can have an idea. But I don't normally need to use it like that because the car has enough power and enough oomph. The auto stop start system can be a pain in the butt for some people. I usually keep it off by putting the transmission into sport mode. It'll automatically disable it, but the button is there to override it. Something that we don't often find these days when it comes to these systems. So it's nice that you have that option so you can disable it if you want to. Now, the main problem with the paddle shifters on here, the flappy paddles, is they're only on the steering wheel, and if you're turning, you're out of luck. I still like having a gear lever so that if I'm turning, I can flip it into the gear that I want. But I mean, it works. The fact that it is a real transmission instead of a CVT means when you're actually shifting, whereas in a CVT, you're just kind of mapping the shift area a little differently. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you're towing something, you'll use the paddle shifters, but it works. So like I said, I keep it in sport mode with the sport transmission, flappy paddles off, and then you have a good amount of power. I find it's actually a little too fidgety almost in total sport mode. I keep it usually in sport mode for the dynamic, but the transmission still in regular drive mode. Then that way it's not revving up to like 3,000 or 4,000 and holding the gears. it's just a little bit more livable on a daily basis. And I'm not saying that this is not livable. I mean, 290 horsepower. You're not even close to territory where you're going to be saying, oh boy, it's too quick for me. It's good. But honestly, much like we talked about with the CR-V a couple weeks ago, I don't have any major faults or complaints with this. Again, the fact that Honda uses the same sort of mechanism for the child window lock where it turns off the driver's ability to open the windows, huge pain in the ass. But for the most part, there's nothing to really dislike about this vehicle. It's much better than the Infiniti QX60. Like, I would not even have to think between taking the two of them. It's just when it comes to the other luxury stuff, we talked about some of the true luxury vehicles out there, but even if you compare it to the Buick Enclave, honestly, I'd take the Buick Enclave over this. But I can certainly see the appeal of having the MDX. It's not necessarily in your face, even with the A-Spec trim, doesn't really add a ton of flash to the outside of it. Still blends in. Most people are going to probably be buying it in black, white, or silver anyway, so you're not always going to see this Apex blue on the road. But for the most part, if you want, again, a safe bet, something that you can count on pretty much every day to get the job done, you have space for 7 passengers in here, and it's comfortable and quiet enough, the MDX could be the vehicle for you. But just don't confuse this with a proper, full-out luxury SUV. This does not come close to something like the BMW X5 or the Mercedes GLE. There just isn't the same level of sophistication when it comes to this vehicle. And if Honda really wants to do something with the Acura brand, they're going to need to decide where they want to go. Do they want to go full-out luxury? They're going to have to do a lot more. Do they want to go full-out performance? Again, just not there with 290 horsepower. They need to do a little bit more. They need a hook, something to get people excited about buying their vehicles more than just being a slightly fancier Honda.
Let's go over fuel economy. The 2020 Acura MDX A-Spec completed our 100-kilometer test loop in 9.3 liters per 100 kilometers, or 25.3 US miles per gallon. By comparison, the Volvo XC90 T6 did it in 8.9 liters, and the BMW X5 xDrive 50i in 11.8 liters. During our 1,141 kilometer week, we averaged 11.2 liters per 100 kilometers, or 21 mpg. But what are the MDX's strengths and weaknesses as far as we're concerned? The new front end looks great, a step up from that beak Acura was designing into all of their vehicles. Interior seat comfort was also good, especially with the Alcantara mix. Power delivery with the 3.5-liter V6 was also a plus in our books. We never felt it was struggling, and the simple approach to trims and features might work out for buyers who want a no-fuss premium experience. Much like the 2019 Honda CR-V we featured a few weeks back, we found very little to truly complain about when it comes to the MDX. You could argue that the available tech is pretty light if you compare it with something like the Buick Enclave, but the MDX will likely see a complete overhaul like the RDX received this past year. The navigation software is dated as well. Regardless of whether or not you like the dual screens, the interface needs some modernization. But those are the complaints that can be addressed with a succeeding generation. What Acura really needs to work on is finding its raison d'etre, which it never really had to begin with. Even in the 90s, vehicles like the Integra, Vigor, Legend, and NSX were some of the most exciting vehicles Honda ever produced, but they never really rivaled BMW for performance, nor Mercedes-Benz for luxury. And over time, that small identity Acura had diminished, and they just became a slightly nicer version of the current Honda portfolio, with the NSX being an exception. Now, I'm not saying Honda shouldn't use the existing platforms and engines between the two brands, but they need a way to hook customers in with something exciting and unique that you can't find from the competition. While there's no doubt I'd personally choose this MDX over the Infiniti QX60, it is setting the bar pretty low to begin with as an easy win for the Acura. But the day Acura builds a vehicle worth driving over a BMW or Mercedes will be the day I get excited about them again, like I used to be back in the 90s.